with Graeme. Today I'm going to try and recreate a recipe that I used to know from my childhood. We're not certain if it's based on any specific recipe, let's say. It's cherry biscuits. If it works, it's a small biscuit base with half a glacé cherry on. Mum used to do these many years ago, and we've never found them in a cookbook, and she said it was based on a recipe to do with shortbread. So I'm going to use the recipe that she suggested in the Dairy Book of Home Cooking with the adaptations that she has suggested. First job is I'm going to measure out the butter first, because it has to soften that little sliver for a bit. When I get this, it weighs 3.8 and I need 4 ounces, and that sliver makes up 4 ounces of butter. So it's required to be softened, so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to sort of cut it up, and therefore the small pieces will sort of warm up, and I'll do this and I'll look at one of the other ingredients, because I need to cream butter and sugar first together. But first we'll cut the butter up, and then I'll show you what we do with getting the caster sugar. The recipe calls for 2 ounces of caster sugar. Now I don't have that, so one of the tricks that we do is I've got this little this mill. It was an attachment for one of these blenders. 2 ounces, and it's just, yeah, that's 2 ounces. And so I put the top finger on, and you do this one-handed because of the camera, and then I screw this on, and we'll then mill it to grind the sugar. And so now we pour in the sugar with the butter. Now the next bit is a difficult bit, which is creaming it, and what I've seen is you start stirring it with a wooden spoon. Now the stated recipe, and this is sometime after creaming the sugar and butter together, we add a bit of vanilla essence, or in this case this is organic vanilla extract. The next thing we have to do is measure out the flour, and I'm using plain white flour for this. Again, we're having to do this one-handed. It says officially sift it. If I do it like that, it should sort of naturally sift, I'm hoping. It's climbing up. Whoop, there it is. 3 ounces of flour. And now the next ingredient I'm going to do is 3 ounces of custard powder, and this is the variation in the recipe on shortbread that this is based on. I've now measured out 3 ounces of flour, custard powder rather, to the flour, and you can see that's now makes 6. Now according to the recipe, this should have been semolina if it was the original one. We put this in, and going over to the book, it would have said use a fork to gradually stir in the flour and semolina, or stir in the flour and the custard powder. So I'm grabbing a fork, and I just clean the spoon up, and we'll then do that and see how that turns out. The recipe now calls, this after there's been some stirring for a while, now calls for me to use my fingertips to draw the mixture together. Now in the original one it would be then put it into a tin to make the shortbread, but the variant is that we make dough. So this is where I now have to get my hands dirty, as it were, and try and draw it together. and see if I can make a nice dough which I can then roll out and then use a cutter, a biscuit cutter of some kind to do that. Okay, this is some time later and I've just managed to roll this out. Now what we're supposed to do now is start getting a few of these. Unfortunately that one I have to pick up, and start using this, populate that tray, and once that's all done and you've got as much of this done, then we start work on dealing with adding the cherries. At this point we start thinking about getting the oven up to temperature. Now officially this says the recipe is 170, but we may have to turn it down a bit because this is a fan oven and that can have various issues. These are the biscuit bases now that I've cut. There was some mixture left over. I could have probably squeezed out another biscuit base, but as you see that this is quite packed. It's lucky that this is not self-raising flour, so in theory they shouldn't merge into one another. And of course the next thing to do is work on halving the glacé cherries. I'm going to work on halving the glacé cherries by using a pair of kitchen scissors where I snip them in half and I take the half and you embed it into the biscuit, there, like so. Take the other one and do it. I don't think when Mum did them she actually used anything to meld them to the biscuits. And so these are all the cherry biscuits with their cherries placed on, ready to be cooked. Now we're going to cook for about 15 minutes. Now one trick I've been told is with a fan assisted oven is to use some foil over the top so that they don't burn, and that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to put some foil on and then we're going to bake them in the oven for about 15 minutes. This is just after about 15 minutes, and I think some of them may be a bit soft to the touch, so the next delicate job will be to get them off of the greased and floured baking greaseproof paper onto that wire rack for cooling. Now what I've done now to facilitate this is I've used a tea towel because the thing is still a bit hot. Well, it's cooling down now, but so I don't burn the surface of my worktop. I now use that and carefully transfer the cherry biscuits to the wire cooling rack. Finally, after they've cooled down, we can put them in the box to take wherever we're going to take them for transit. And that was Mum's cherry biscuits.